All right, everyone, and welcome to the August 16th webinar for the Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign. Today, we have a little bit of a different focus because we're going to have some discussion time towards the end, but we have an awesome featured presentation from Stacie Bender. And we're going to focus today, though, on students and educators as they prepare for year 5 of the campaign and the 2023 GLOBE IVSS. So we're going to have some discussion later today, as well as a featured presentation, which I'll get into in a couple minutes. I want to show you this image here. I saw that this was shared by David Attenborough, and this is just a cool 1 in a million shot of a tree in Hardee County, West Virginia, in the United States, being struck by lightning. Okay, we're not going to do the typical, comparing the two trees today because we have some other things we want to do, some features. But I just want to showcase this image because I thought this was just kind of a mind-blowing image to capture. And this was captured by photographer Debbie Parker in Hardee County, West Virginia. Just wanted to showcase that because it's pretty amazing image, pretty amazing capture. All right, so today, our agenda, after my standard introduction and some metrics, Peter Falcon is going to discuss an activity that was actually created for the NASA and Globe Goes to Camp project led by Tina Hart at the NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton Roads, Virginia in the US, about tree cookies or tree ring activities. So, and then later on, I'm just going to feature a bunch of activities. We have a couple slides to showcase some activities and where you can grab them and, what these activities are about. And they really will help, students prepare, hopefully, to get kind of that hands-on feel for, some of the data and the data analysis that they can do for the 2023 IVSS. Because as you know, this is a student research campaign. So we're hoping to provide as much data and information and online tools that we can to get students prepared to, come up with some student research questions, to do research projects that they can eventually be submitted to IVSS in the spring of 2023. Following that, we're going to have a featured speaker, as I mentioned, Stacie Bender, and she is a physical scientist from USDA Forest Service Geospatial Technology and Application Center, also known as GTAC. And she will be talking about her work with tree canopy cover layer and a lot of the things that the U.S. Forest Service does with managing trees and beyond. And then after that, Peter Nelson will highlight the current status of the NASA Globe Land Cover Challenge 2022, Land Cover in a Changing Climate. And then I will showcase, as I mentioned, a couple of activities that just kind of overarching activities, explanation and showcasing of activities that can be used inside and outside the classroom, used as a complementary material for research projects as well. And then Peter Nelson will highlight the future of forest lessons, one that he is very familiar with, and he wants to showcase this because it's a great lesson with the multiple parts to really bring together the data and the online tools, in the sense of a classroom lesson that can be extended, into research as well and looking at the data. Then what we will do for about 20 minutes, we will have 3 breakout rooms, and we'll choose those later, of course. But the 3 breakout rooms are going to be basically, room 1 is going to be, what are you teaching? And these are going to be informal, come into the room and then, discuss, basically the main topic with the people in the room and with us. What are you teaching? This is, Peter Falcon will be the host of this room. So he will be hosting this room. Next one is going to be, what do you want to see in year 5 of the campaign? I'll be hosting that. And then room 3 will be the 2023 IVSS project discussion, and Peter Nelson will be leading the discussion in that room. And like I said, we're going to be there for about 20 minutes. And, what I want to mention is, feel free to, if you need to jump back and forth between some of the rooms, because we don't have, a lot of time. We're not going to do 3 separate sessions based upon the schedule today, but feel free to jump, back and forth leave a room and then jump into another one if you like, because there's going to be ongoing discussions. There won't be, we're not going to be presenting things from the start, that you'd be missing something. So we're just going to have some, informal discussions, to prepare us for year 5 of the campaign, which would essentially begin October 1st of this, and we'll have an announcement of that coming up soon. And then, and then kind of something we have here, it's introducing the Trees Campaign team sign-up sheets for classroom speakers. So what that means is we want you to understand that if any of us are, can be available to give, virtual presentations for classrooms to talk a little bit about the campaign, talk about the land cover, tree height, greenings observations, that you may want to discuss, or to discuss any of the online tools and things that we've featured in the last 4 years of the campaign. And then we'll end that. So this isn't, I'm not stealing Peter's thunder here. I just want to showcase this because, as you may know, right now we have the current Land Cover Challenge 2022, Land Cover and Changing Climate going on. We have 10 days left in this challenge. And I did some quick stats this morning. I looked, and during this time period from July 26th to 26 July to 16 August 2022, we have 1,047 land cover observations from 724 global locations. So that's great numbers. Let's increase that, but that's just under 3 weeks of data collection for this challenge. So that's great. And there's the link on the bottom, but Peter can talk a little bit more about that and some of the findings he may be seeing in that. I also wanted to showcase that, because of the Land Cover Challenge, we're aligning it a lot to what Camp Landsat is doing. And I hope some of you have visited this. But this week's topic with Camp Landsat is water and wellness. So, feel free to go. Each week they introduce a new topic, which we align a lot of our Globe social media to, as well as the Land Cover Challenge. So this is, I know it's a long URL on the bottom, and I can pop that in the chat, later on. But feel free to go there, and you can look at the past week's topics as well. And then there's 1 week. Next week would be the final week for the special topics, the weekly topics. So go ahead and check that out. But Camp Landsat is an amazing thing, and I love the logo too. So with the campaign, I always like to include these metrics, and I'll draw your attention to the bottom, year 4 and full campaign. We have over 14,000 tree height measurements coming in from over 5,000 global sites, almost 7,000 land cover measurements coming in from 4,400 plus global sites, and we have over 7,000 green up, green down measurements coming from almost 380 global sites. And this is since the beginning of year 4 of the campaign on October 1st of 2021. And as you can see in the full campaign, we have lots of awesome observations. We have 116,202 measurements coming in from over 42,000 global locations during the campaign so far. So, one thing we want to focus on, with year 5 is we want to really look at change over time over the 5 years, because at NASA, looking at change over time is super important, and kind of the minimum gold standard here is looking at the change over time within 5 years. So we have an amazing amount of data coming in, over the last 4 years, well, just under 4 years. September 15th is when we began, just under 4 years for the campaign. So lots of great data, and we're hoping to focus on that for year 5, to really focus on how students and teachers can look at that data and change over time, with it, for the life of the campaign, and even beyond that, well before the campaign too. But we want to really highlight, the data coming in during the campaign, and see basically how things have changed, related to tree height, land cover, greenings, even carbon cycle as well. So I wanted to focus on that too. But you can see, we have a great campaign. We have lots of blogs, lots of participants from 60 countries. We've had, this is a 48th webinar, main webinar for the campaign, and we've had 8 special ones where we've highlighted some campaign information, like with Globe Africa, the European Phenology Campaign, Mission Mosquito, and a lot of these other special webinar events. So I wanted to just show you this here. These are 2 videos created at NASA Scientific Visualization Studio. And this, because, wildfires in California are a hot topic right now and have been for several months. This is back from some of these California wildfires, the Dixie and the Calder fires from back in 2021. But these images and these visualizations show you just how quickly these have grown. And I'm going to pause here a second to see if, I know, and I'm trying to put you on the spot, Peter Nelson, but I know, you're really familiar with this. If there's anything you'd like to say about any of these videos that we're seeing right now.
Well, I think one is that all of this data is available to us because it is, coming from those satellites, and so, if we've had a lot of students who are really interested in making and understanding wildfire and some of these visualizations like this. So I just kind of want to spark everybody's interest that, looking at these day-by-day progressions is an important understanding of not only the resources, but kind of what might end up coming back in the future. And so, it provides really interesting ability to look back in time, to look at severity of wildfire in certain places. And like I said, if you have any students or are interested in bringing an activity like this into your classroom, let us know, because previously this used to be something that only scientists at NASA could do, or somebody like Stacie, and all the people that she's around, make animations and do things like this. But we can all do this now. So I just kind of want to put that out there, that this could be an activity that you actually do in your area, because all of us have experienced wildfire. Even if it's not recently like this, we can go back and look at a fire that happened nearby you in 1984 or 1985 or sometime like that in the past, and actually see not only this gray, which is a little false, but we can actually look at how does that green up after this event, and in what way does that green up. And that actually leads us into something that might be very visual, which is tree height. That recovery after a fire can sometimes be very obvious, but when we measure something like tree height or canopy cover. So there's some really interesting things that we can highlight now, just because the technology has gotten this much better. And so you don't have to wait for somebody at NASA to make an animation like this for your area. We can help you understand and how to make some of those for your locations. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, that's perfect. Because we as Peter mentioned, we've come a long way with making these, and I say I talk about, the general science community, making these online tools, and the ability to create things like this, make it accessible for all. So, and I think, being able to make these really, brings it home where you can really get an intimate knowledge of, the data that you're actually looking at, if you can create it yourself. So, yeah, thank you for that, Peter. So, just wanted to also showcase this again. If you haven't seen it yet, we have over 600 downloads for our recent trees paper, The Potential of Citizen Science Data to Complement Satellite and Airborne LiDAR Tree Height Measurements, Lessons from the GLOBE program. This was published on 21 June of this year. So, and there's a link at the bottom. It's pretty small, but we can share that as well. But, feel free to go check that paper out and download it. This is a free download because we have it open sourced for everyone. So you can check that out as well. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to, pass it over to Peter Falcon in a second, and he's going to talk about this activity, and there's an associated video with it called Stories Trees Tell, and learning the language of our tall forest friends, with an activity, as I mentioned earlier, that was created for the Globe Goes to Camp program with Tina Hart at NASA Langley Research Center, where she works with folks from foresters and students and educators from around the United States in a lot of the national forests to hold these virtual kind of hybrid camps. And this is one of the activities that was created, and you'll see in the video is working with some of the people there, some of the students and educators and foresters to develop these activities. So let me unshare and pass it over to Peter. You good, Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. As I mentioned, I'm functioning on some low bandwidth here. I just came to work for the first time, and for some reason, it kicks me out of the internet. So I'm working off of my phone, and I cannot load the activity. So perhaps you can load it for me as I talk about it. Would that be okay?
Yeah, let me grab it.
Thank you. Sorry about that, guys. So as Brian is loading that, the activity that we're going to be talking about is called Stories Trees Tell. And it's a great activity where we can measure a lot of different things about the trees by measuring the cookie or the slice of the tree trunk. It takes about 30 minutes for this activity. It's geared for like young age, pretty much any age actually, but in the video you can see there's a young 12-year-old, and he seems to be doing well with it. And the purpose of the activity is to understand how the dendrochronology of this, or the study of the data from the tree rings. Hey, I like how Peter smiled because I butchered that word. Excellent. I'm glad that we have some teachers out there. So here we can actually measure, a lot of different things from the tree. We can measure the age of the tree by measuring the growth of the tree rings. We can see what that tree went through by measuring, by seeing the colors as well. You'll see in the activity there, it talks about the early wood and the later wood color. But we also can see the climatic effect of what that tree went through in its lifespan. By measuring the width of the rings, we can understand the years where there's perhaps abundance of rainfall or perhaps drought. If you scroll down just a little bit, you can see there the materials that you're going to be needing. You're going to need a tree stump, like the image that Brian showed earlier, or a printout of one. You're going to need a paper or journal to kind of, record your measurements, pencils as well. And like I said, if you have that cookie, that tree ring, that's great. If not, we can take a picture of one or download one from the internet. So as we scroll down just a bit more, Brian, thank you. There you can see under the overall overview, we can see what we can measure. We can measure the age of the tree. We can measure the climatic effects that tree went through in its lifespan. We can see any trauma that it went through, any scars, any loss of limbs, fire, things like that. And we can also see if it was under any type of disease by measuring the wavy lines. So we can see if there's any like beetles or insects, infestation, any diseases that tree went through, all by measuring the waves and lines of that cookie. And what we can do is we can then extrapolate that and have students create their own story and create their own cookie, and they can talk about how things affected them and their lifespan. So as they're drawing their rings, if something happened to them in year 3 or year 4, they can kind of make little marks in their tree ring and then talk about that and how that affected them. And on the bottom there, you see a young boy. He's 12 years old. He created his own tree ring, and we have a YouTube video that we can play. It's about 5 minutes. So if we want to play that, it kind of will go over a little bit what we talked about, but explain more about the students, what he went through, and talk about his tree ring. So you can go ahead and thank you.
I don't think we're getting sound, Brian.
Maybe if we turned on closed captions, and if we don't have sound, we can, we can kind of read up what they're talking about. Perfect.
Welcome back, guys. We're so happy to have you join us here again today as we spend a little bit more time in the woods. This might look like I'm here at Camp Discovery, but I'm actually not. I know we've all been spending a little bit more time at home, and I'm actually just down the street from my house in the woods where I try to walk at least once or twice every day. And sometimes when I do, I kind of look up at all of these beautiful trees. And I kind of wonder a little bit about them. How long have they been here? What have they seen? I really wish they could tell me their tree story. And as it turns out, they kind of can. As I was walking a little bit further away from here, I saw that a neighbor had recently cut down a tree. And I was actually able to get a part of that tree trunk and cut a little bit of a sliver off to make what we can kind of call a tree cookie. And I'll show this to you because the tree cookie, the inside of the tree trunk or the actual limb tells us a whole lot about the tree. It kind of tells its tree story. So for instance, if you guys can see all of the little rings, each ring stands for a growth year for that tree. So if you count them, and I counted about 16, that stands for each year that the tree has been here. So the tree's been here for about 16 years. And if we see, each of the rings is comprised of two parts. We have the lighter part, which represents that spring growth period where you grow a lot. And I know we all have times like that where we get really, really hungry and grow and grow and grow and outgrow our shoes. And then it's also made up of this darker part of the ring, which is where growth kind of stalls or kind of decreases in those fall and winter months. So each ring does represent, you know, one of those years. And then we can also look at how wide those rings are. A wide ring will suggest, you know, a big growth period. And sometimes a really, really narrow ring will suggest a really, you know, kind of decreased growth period. And that might be because of some sort of insect infestation, or maybe even like a drought or a really, really cold spell. And then sometimes we can even look at, I don't know if you guys can see this scar on this tree. And sometimes scars are left because of fires or because of a fallen limb. So we are able to learn so much of a tree's story from just looking at inside the tree trunk. Okay. So I was hoping today that you guys might be able to show and tell your own tree story. And I've actually asked for my son, Will, who's currently filming this, to help me in representing his story, just like this tree. So guys, let's take a look at what Will comes up with. Come on, let's go see what he does.
So this is my tree story right here. As you can see, this little circle in the middle, that was my first year, so when I was 1. And these first 5 or so rings, they're pretty decently sized, and that's because when I was growing a lot. And then this line right here, it's a bit wavy. That is when I got the stomach bug. So for a tree, this would be like real bugs eating away at its wood. And then you can see these dark marks right here. Those would be scars for like a tree story. And these scars, for me, they're when I lost 4 teeth when I was 8 years old. This is my 8th ring. And for a tree, this would be like losing a branch or something like that. So that's my tree story.
Well, Will, I thank you so much for taking the time to not only be my amazing videographer today, but to also draw and share your tree story. And for those of you watching, I would really love to see your tree stories as well. So if you actually create one, I would love for you guys to upload it and tag us on Facebook or Instagram so that we can continue to share in this way. Well, friends, until we see each other again, I hope you stay tuned because we're going to have more of these fun videos for you. And we cannot wait to see you back at camp. So from Miss Heather and from Will, we wish you a wonderful day. Bye, my friends.
Thanks for sharing that, Brian. Yeah, so that is a very neat little way to get the kids active learning about trees. See there, Will had his tree ring there. I'm sure at age 16 he have his first heartbreak, and we'll see how that looks like. And then as you, as in the document, it also go back and shows some of the key words that you'll be using, and a lot of other information, some questions that you can review, and some images of tree rings. So it's a great little activity. As I mentioned, it doesn't take long, and it's a great way to students to, once again, go from measuring the trees to telling their story, and how it relates using these tree cookies. And I see that Peter Nelson put the tree ring data in there. Also, if possible, maybe we can put this activity in the chat box if we haven't done that already. I'll see if I can do that. But with that, I will turn it back over to Brian. And if there's any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we can talk about them.
And I'm going to jump in right here, Peter, because what I wanted to do is have everybody, not go through this full activity, because this is a great way to think about your own life. And I want to use this a little later on when we start talking about change and some of the things that Stacie's going to actually talk about, and some of the ways that we actually think about generational science and how we actually pass information on about something long-lived like trees. And, when things can live 200 to 1,000 years, how do we actually pass that information on? And so, thinking about our own life, or what is happening in our own life, is an important one. So I want everybody to kind of take a moment here and start off. And I want to, because this is where that third activity goes from. And this helps us to start taking the satellite imagery that we're doing and putting it into a little bit of context. So what I want to have everybody do, if you can, I'm going to try this for the first time. I have never used a whiteboard in Zoom, so go with me on this. It can be a lot of fun. So what I wanted to do is think about your own time series of your life. Okay, and so, here, as Brian mentioned, we're celebrating 50 years of Earth observations from space. So for many of us who are here, our life is actually contained within this satellite record, which is pretty neat. But we need to put ourselves into that timeline, into the appropriate space. And so what Peter introduced us to was one way of starting to think about when we were born and what are these important events in our own life. And this is exactly what the Forest Service really does, but on a massive scale, with millions and millions of people being trees in this case. And so what I'd like you to do in front of you is start with a timeline, okay? And at the very beginning, I want you to start off with putting 1972. Okay, and we're choosing that date because that is when we started getting our Earth observations from space. And monitoring forests was one of the key things that we were wanting to look at that time. And so, so that's when our timeline starts. And I want you to put on this timeline, the end date here is 2022. Okay, so that's when our timeline is going to end. And what I'd like you to do is think about and put yourself onto this timeline. It doesn't have to be really specific, but when were you born? When does your time start with this? So I'm going to, just demonstrate here. I am going to give myself away. 1976 is when I came around and met my older sibling, Landsat, for the first time. And so my timeline, my cookie would start in 1976. And then, going through, what were some important events? Think about only two or three important events, and what years did those occur in your life? And so take a moment and do that. And so for me, I'm going to add in just a couple more dates, and I'll describe those when we get there. And I'll do one more. Okay. So these are the important, or a couple important years in my life. And again, part of the way that we can think about this is things are basically going along fine. My tree is growing at a particular rate until this event happens. And these events are really important, not only to me, but maybe to the people around me. And this is exactly what our trees are experiencing. Sometimes, they're out there and they're experiencing something on their own. And one of the big things that we're curious about is, are there years that are the same for me as they are for other people on this call? And that is a great way to actually take this individual cookie activity and then combine it together and look across your classroom and see, are there particular years that were eventful years? And so, you know, here I want to pass it off to Stacie, because this is a really important thing that the Forest Service does. Is wildfires only occur on 1% of the landscape, you know, a year. It's a really rare sort of thing that happens. But if we look cumulatively across the 50 years that we've been observing from space, we can see some really interesting patterns. And so, Stacie, I want to hand it to you at this point and have you kind of describe, how does the Forest Service, you know, think about this long-term data like this, but how they think about managing these long-term lived species that are the trees on our landscape.
Thanks, Peter. 50 years. Well, I don't have 50 years in my presentation today, but if someone wants to know about longer time periods, I do have contact information, and the people I work with, they're fantastic. I mean, they all love to talk about these kinds of things and share what they know and to hear what other people have to say and to hear their questions. So even though I don't have the 50-year record in my presentation, I do have some examples of landscape change over several years. And I can talk about how our project, the project that I'm going to share today, the Tree Canopy Project, words are hard sometimes. The Tree Canopy Cover Project that I help with does look at landscape change over time. So I do have a few examples, and again, the people I work with, I feel very fortunate that the people I work with are incredibly curious and they're incredibly open to hearing from other people. So if you do want information about that 50-year record, then totally post a comment in the chat, follow up. I have some contact info at the end that we can share and we can talk further for sure. I mean, how do you cram 50 years into 20 minutes? Anyway, if anyone has an idea of how to do that, you have a magical time machine or something that I don't know about, let me know. But let me share my screen and let's go through some interesting applications of data and some cool images. And I'm hoping that it's coming across soon. Let me know if someone sees a title slide.
Looks good.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So like Peter mentioned, my name is Stacie Bender. I'm your presenter today. I work for the USDA Forest Service. That's within the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We're a federal government agency, and I'm presenting about the Tree Canopy Cover Project, but I definitely don't do it by myself. We have a large team of people in our office and with partners across the country who are collaborating to make this work happen. So I just wanted to make sure I give a shout out to the folks who help out in critical ways. Again, I can't do this by myself. And science really is teams. No one person can know everything. And so to get the best outputs, continuous improvements, we need people with expertise from all areas, from different specialties, and it really comes down to people in the end. Science is great, computers can do amazing things, but you need people to make the science go. So I'd like to acknowledge several folks on the teams that I work with, and those are Kevin, Nathan, Michelle, Karen, Josh, Bonnie, Ian, Wendy, Linda, and Vicky. And there are several other people too who have been involved in the years, but these are the folks who I work with regularly currently. So why should we try to understand or monitor trees? There are pretty commonly known examples, I think, associated with the Forest Service. I mean, we're interested in trees, period, as organisms. How old are they? How are they adapting in time? And then there's the fire aspect, wildfires. A lot of people associate the Forest Service with wildland firefighting, and that definitely impacts trees for sure. There are also impacts, indirect impacts, where if we lose the trees, it's not a direct impact from, say, one tree in one area, but we lose the soil stabilization if we lose those trees. And then if it rains really hard at a later time, we can get floods that wash down canyons or rivers and damage buildings and roads, and sometimes people die. They're really dangerous. And so when I say those impacts are indirect, it's not that they're not important, but it's like we lose the trees in the upper part of the watershed, possibly due to a fire, and there are more impacts down the road. No pun intended there. There are also wildlife applications. Certain species of animals like certain types of tree canopy cover or tree density. Some of them like more open landscapes. Maybe they're hunters. Some prefer more closed landscapes. There's the timber industry and harvest that provide wood for our buildings, for homes, for other forest products and applications. And water quality is also huge. I mentioned fires and potentially debris flows if we lose the soil stabilization that's provided by live trees. Water quality is important. Healthy trees generally leads to better water quality. And the Forest Service and the public lands of the United States provide clean drinking water if those watersheds are in good shape to millions of people in the United States. And there's also recreation applications. Forest Service lands are home to ski areas, hikers, fishers, people who are out enjoying themselves and enjoying forests and the trees that are on them. And then on the right side of this slide are two cool applications that I didn't really think about when I first joined the Forest Service, but I've become more familiar with over the last couple of years, and they're super interesting. The top photo is a example of features from Native American communities. Sorry, I mentioned words are hard this morning. And they need certain types of trees to build and carve these artifacts of cultural importance. And there's also a urban and community forestry program within the Forest Service that I didn't know about when I first started. And they're working not on national forests, but with cities and towns, urban communities, to monitor the health of trees in their cities, given that trees are present there and they're so important to human health. They provide shade, there's the urban heat island effect, and they provide mental health benefits. You know, being outside, I can't speak for everyone, but I know for me, like being out for a walk, it often just makes me feel better. And so there are all of these interdisciplinary aspects where the Forest Service is looking at trees for timber, for fire fuels monitoring, but also for all of these other types of applications that I've learned about since I've been with the agency the last several years. So I think it's cool there's such a wide variety there. Just a really quick short history about the Forest Service as an agency. I mentioned we're a federal government agency within the U.S. government, within the Department of Agriculture, and the motto is caring for the land and serving people. And our mission is listed there. It's an interdisciplinary mission with a focus on landscapes, science is in there. We're looking at land management of forests and grasslands. And we're looking to do that to meet the needs of present and future generations. There's a human element in there. It's not just science, it's just for science's sake. It's not just the landscapes, but how people interact with those. The agency was established over 100 years ago by Congress with the intention to provide timber and clean water for people in and around those lands. And so the idea of clean water provided by healthy watersheds and timber goes back over 100 years in terms of the agency. I mean, it goes back further looking at it through different lenses. But as that time went by after the agency was established, the idea of multiple uses came about, and I just showed some pictures on the previous slide about all the applications and things that the Forest Service is doing to monitor different aspects of the land, and trees are core and important to all of those. And so the idea of multiple uses has come through legislation and agency direction. So it's an interesting thing to see how the agency has evolved from just clean water and timber focus to all of these other things. I mean, there's no reason to be bored. If I ever encounter someone who works for the Forest Service, and I don't think I have, who says, I'm bored, I'll be like, come talk to us. We have plenty of things in my group that you can learn about. And it's the largest forestry research organization in the world. The Forest Service has what's called a deputy area called Research and Development. And that's where a lot of the science is happening within the Forest Service. But I mean, it's happening all across the agency, but there are all kinds of scientists, foresters, there are ecologists, hydrologists, atmospheric scientists, botanists, all kinds of people from all kinds of scientific disciplines working in the Forest Service. Like I said, it's really interdisciplinary, and I really like that aspect of it because everything is connected. All right, so the focus, I guess, of what I'm sharing today is the USDA Forest Service tree canopy cover data, and that's one of the projects I work on, one of the groups I work on within the Forest Service. Here we see an example of the data across the lower 48 United States, the southeastern Alaska coast, the Panhandle area, and then extending a bit westward, the Hawaiian Islands, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We don't have data all over the entire United States, but most of it. And we recognize that trees on all lands are important, not just the national forests. Sure, the national forests are important for sure, but those forests, they don't just stop at a forest boundary where there's a straight line and says this is Forest Service public land and this is a state forest or this is a privately owned land. Those forests don't stop, and so we have partners and cooperators and collaborators and many different types of organizations all across the country trying to help manage trees across the country, and they need information to do that. And so to build those data, those tree canopy cover data, we use space and airplanes. And it's always kind of cool to frame it this way because yes, there's so much input and there are all these numbers that go into our models, but they're coming from space-based platforms, from cameras on airplanes that are flying over landscapes and capturing high-resolution imagery and pictures. There are, I mentioned people earlier, there are people involved at every single one of these steps. They're looking at the high-resolution airborne imagery to try to get an estimate of real-world conditions. They're running models, and they're building the rockets and the satellites that have to go up so that we can get data from satellites like Landsat that we use to then build the tree canopy cover data sets. And I'm always kind of excited about to say we're looking at trees from space, and I can't speak for everyone, but a lot of the people I work with are big nerds, and so I'm not talking about this type of tree from space, but we're using spaceborne data in combination with lots of other things to build these tree canopy cover data sets. So let's look at those building blocks. And I'm going to give an overview of these pieces here, but if anyone wants more detail, I think we'll probably have some time hopefully at the end for some questions, or you can follow up afterwards. And if I don't know the answer, like I mentioned, the people on my team, some of them are like seriously specialized experts and they know all the details. So if you have a question I can't answer, then we can find an answer for you from one of our team members. So these are the building blocks I mentioned, the satellite data from satellites like Landsat. We're using the electromagnetic spectrum, leaning on that to get the spectral data from Landsat. We have a few other data layers that go in that I'll talk about. We have what's called photo-interpreted canopy cover estimates from the high-resolution imagery from airplanes, and the people are involved intimately there to take a close look at that imagery and trying to get estimates of the canopy cover as real-world conditions. We have statistical models, which is kind of this branching diagram in the lower center part of the slide. And all of that together goes into a process or a workflow where we get those tree canopy covered data on the out end there as an output. So let's talk about Landsat first. I know Peter, Brian, and so many other people that I've talked with. I mean, on my teams in the GLOBE program, like everybody gets really excited about Landsat as our scientists. And I mean, honestly, it's in terms of data sets and sources of data, Landsat is one of our best friends. We currently use the Landsat 5 through 8 data. to build the tree canopy cover data sets within the Forest Service. We are excited about Landsat 9. We're not using it yet in our current production, but again, like we had Landsat watch parties last fall when Landsat 9 was launched. And so we're excited to start incorporating those data into the next version of updates for our data sets. And I wanted to share just this short video of the Landsat 8 launch because, again, going back to all of these pieces that go into to building our Forest Service tree canopy cover data, it starts with a satellite that gets launched into space. So there are rocket scientists who are playing a role in building our data sets in the Forest Service. And I guess I probably won't play the whole video, but I don't know, I just get chills watching things like this because it starts here with a rocket launch and this series of satellites with Landsat. And then there are so many applications of those data. The Forest Service tree canopy cover is just one. All right, hopping to the next slide here, I mentioned the electromagnetic spectrum earlier, and we can use that to differentiate between different types of land surfaces. And I mean, this is just such a foundational building block to what we're doing with our tree canopy cover data. And we need to know if a part of the land surface has vegetation on it, then we can estimate the cover on it. So we need to start with spectral data from satellites like Landsat to determine what's there, and then we can run statistical models to understand how much. And here's one example of some of the spectral data that come out of the Landsat building blocks that we then use to put into our tree canopy cover models. And this is an example of a wildfire in northern Minnesota that happened in late 2011, in the fall of 2011. I think it was September. And being able to see these landscape changes in the data sets that we're building from those Landsat building blocks is really exciting. And then being able to look at photographs. Oh, I have skipped this slide. I had a photo of that fire on the ground, but maybe I missed it. Sorry. It might be in later in the slide. Sorry about that. I get really excited to show people photos of what things look like on the ground too, because not only do we have all of the satellite data, but it's so powerful in combination with photos that people contribute from on the ground so that we can see the real world conditions. But let's go on for the moment. We've talked about the Landsat data, the satellites, the electromagnetic spectrum. I want to share next another of our inputs, and that's photo interpreted tree canopy cover. And this is one area where human expertise comes into play. In our modeling, we have to have an estimate of what we could call the real world conditions that are on the ground. But we don't have enough people to actually go out to every spot to check everything. So what we do kind of in the meantime to do the best we can with what we have in terms of resources is to look at high resolution photography or high resolution imagery captured by cameras on airplanes through a program called the National Agricultural Imagery Program, or NAEP for short. And that's another United States Department of Agriculture program where they're collecting this high resolution imagery all across the country on a regular basis every 2 to 3 years. And the program started, I think, in 2003 in its current format. So it's been in place for a while, and there are some earlier versions of the program, but the data are a little bit different. But anyway, just beyond the history, what we're using now is high resolution imagery from the NAEP program. And the geospatial analysts, or the people who are trying to get those estimates of real world conditions, will overlay a what we call a dot grid, a grid of points on this imagery, and then they'll look at the imagery and determine if that dot falls on a tree or not. And then out of all the dots, the percentage of dots that land on trees is the best estimate of the tree canopy cover in this area that we can get, given that we don't have enough people to send out to every location that we would want to visit in person. So we have to get creative and do what we can with what we have as best we can. And just a quick example, these images are from one of our analysts who also recorded a demo video that we do have. If we don't have that embedded in this PowerPoint because it's a pretty large file, but let us know if that's something you're interested in seeing. So the analyst will, like I mentioned, click on the points, determine if they fall on a tree or on bare ground. And in this example, the red little marks are not tree, the green marks are tree. And then the portion of the dot or the marks that fall on trees out of all the dots is our estimate of canopy cover. So we've talked about the satellite data, a little bit about the photo interpreted tree canopy cover data from the people. Let's talk a little bit about a few more of the inputs. One thing that's really important that I've learned since I've been with the Forest Service is trees that are not on Forest Service land but are still really important. And a lot of those trees occur in agricultural areas. So our group in the Forest Service, to build the tree canopy cover data, we actually take agricultural data on crop type info into our models, because almond trees or orange trees in agricultural areas, they're not on Forest Service lands, but they're still trees. And so we're still interested in modeling those. So we include agricultural data in our model inputs, of all things. That was something that was a little bit surprising when I first learned that several years ago. But now it just seems second nature, like it seems pretty obvious, like, well, those are trees too. We also use digital elevation models, topographic data. I mean, generally, especially out west, the higher you go, the more trees there are. And then we also use the location of water bodies in our modeling. In our raw model outputs, sometimes we have trees that show up in the middle of lakes where there are actually no trees. So when we add the water body information, it gives us a more accurate output. All right, so we've talked about the satellite data, the photo interpreted canopy cover data, some of the additional inputs like the agricultural data. And the last thing I want to talk about just in this quick overview is the model that we use. It's all based on statistics, lots of math under the covers, under the hood of these models that people have worked on for a really long time to build. The algorithm that we use is called random forest, and it's a decision tree model. And so it looks at different combinations of inputs and then will give us an estimate of canopy cover based on combinations of those inputs from the satellites, from the photo interpreted canopy cover data, and then we also use the agriculture and water body and the digital elevation model data, some of those other things that I mentioned. And so all of that together goes into the algorithm and it crunches the numbers, and then on the outside we get an estimate of tree canopy cover for each pixel. We're modeling tree canopy cover across the United States on a pixel basis, 30 by 30 meters for each pixel, which matches at the Landsat data resolution. And then we also get estimates of the error in the model that come out of the statistical model. And that's really important because we need to understand where our model is doing well and where we have areas for improvement so that we can try to continually make those improvements. I mean, science is always about improving. We get more information and we adjust and we adapt and we improve our outputs. So those are all the building blocks at an overview level. I mean, of course, I don't say that's just it. Because so much work has gone into this by so many people over so many years to get us where we are and to continually improve what we have. So I don't say that it's just this and that's it and it's done. If you want those details or you have follow-up questions, of course we can share more for sure. And then we get the tree canopy cover map that is output, and I want to share a few cool examples zoomed in. So this is the fire that I showed earlier when I was talking about the inputs and from the Landsat spectral data. This is actually a map, one of our maps of tree canopy cover in this area. The left image is the conditions in 2011 before the fire happened. The fire happened in late 2011. And then the image on the right is the tree canopy cover map and data from 2016, 5 years apart. And the purple colors are low to no tree canopy cover. The green colors mean more tree canopy cover. And we can easily pick up this burn scar, understand that canopy cover was lost here. We can see it in the tree canopy cover data, but then we can also see it through news reports, through photographs that people contribute from on the ground who visit this area. And this is the photo that I thought I had missed earlier, and I'm so glad I had it earlier and I just forgot and can share it. This photo, and there's a little slider tool in this news article that they took these photos before and after the fire, and you can swipe back and forth and see the dramatic changes in the landscape. So that's one point in time, that photograph that I just showed, but we're also looking to build data across longer time periods. This animation shows a region in the Pacific Northwest over, I think it's 2011 to 2019. And there's a fire that happened in this area, and it happened in 2015. And parts of this landscape were severely burned. The red areas mean high severity. I think Peter or Brian, someone mentioned severity of burn earlier today. And we can easily see that severe burn in our tree canopy cover data. There's a large loss of canopy in the severely burned areas. So we can estimate, not just is change there, yes or no, but we can estimate how much canopy cover has been lost due to fires, just showing in this example. And another cool just feature of this example, let me play the animation just real quick. This part of the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of timber harvests in this area, and you can see up until the fire, you'll see little spots being cleared and for timber and the harvest there. So all kinds of things in one image. Like some days I look at these and I can get lost just exploring. I'm like, ooh, what's that? Ooh, what's that? And I think exploration is a big part of science and a big part of what keeps us going, even if we get frustrated, like the code's not working or this model output looks weird. Now we have to figure out what's going on. It's like, if you frame it as an exploration, then it's like the problems are just puzzles to be solved. And they can be frustrating, yes, but I think that framing it as exploration and puzzles definitely helps people keep going. So circling back a little bit to bring in some elements of the GLOBE program, I first met Peter several years ago and then met Brian, I think, through Peter a few years ago in the GLOBE program. And we've been talking about how can we use GLOBE data to make our Forest Service data better, at least in some way. And so we've been talking along the way and we have a bunch of ideas, but one way that's more achievable, I think, in the near term that we can do is compare the land cover photos from GLOBE observers to the Forest Service data, like the tree canopy cover data. And what we've started to do is try to figure out how to do that on a large scale, but also manually just starting to take a look at some of the GLOBE observations and then see how they match up to our Forest Service data. So in this example, this is from just outside the Huron National Forest in Michigan in the United States, and the landscape photos from the GLOBE Observer show a mixed landscape. There's some trees there. There's also open grassy areas and like maybe a narrow road or path. And then the purple arrow on this slide, on the image on the right, is pointing to the area where this GLOBE observation was taken, like along this water body or lake. And in the tree canopy cover image on the right, the darker green colors mean more tree canopy cover, the lighter green or white mean no or very little tree canopy cover. And there's kind of a mix in this area, and so it matches, we feel like matches the GLOBE photos pretty well. I mean, the GLOBE photos show a landscape that's not totally tree covered, but there are definitely some trees present. So even just manual, easy exploration of the GLOBE data sets with the photos and then comparing those photos even qualitatively to the data that the Forest Service built is a valuable exercise. And just one more example in a very different landscape of what I just described. This is a globe observation from the urban area of Salt Lake City, which is near where I am. And it's from just right in the center of the city, a very urban area. And looking at the photographs, we see a lot of impervious area, a lot of roads and buildings. There's a little bit of grass, there's a few trees. And I looked to see if the tree canopy cover data were picking up any of these trees, even though there was just a few in this urban area according to the globe photos. And it does. I mean, it's a little hard, I guess, because the buildings in the map on the right are gray, and the colors that represent very little tree canopy cover but non-zero tree canopy cover are also kind of whitish gray, very light green. But when I clicked on some of the pixels for the tree canopy cover data in this area, they showed me values between 1 and 10% tree canopy cover, which is in line with what the globe photos show. There's a few trees in those photos, not a lot, but a few. And understanding that it's an urban area, I wouldn't expect continuous tree cover. But it was a helpful check on the Forest Service tree canopy cover data, because sometimes we do have trouble capturing those trees in urban areas. We do a lot better. It's a lot easier to model trees where there's a large forest of high canopy cover versus these spotty trees in urban areas. But then again, trees in urban areas, I mean, they're so important considering shade and urban heat island effects, and then just the mental health benefits of having some greenery around. And I have just a couple more slides. I hope I'm not taking up too much of the time. But going forward, what's next? Well, we're continuously updating and improving our data sets. The current version that's out there, that's publicly available, was released in 2019, so almost 3 years ago. And we had 2 years of data for the year 2011 and 2016. Our production team, in coordination with scientists at the Forest Service, they have been doing so much work to update and overhaul our workflow to include more refined inputs. We're including more satellites and sensors now. We have Landsat, which is just a bedrock for this project, but we're also starting to include data from the Sentinel satellites to increase the amount of data we have. And we're also looking at modeling tree canopy cover at more time steps, annual time steps between 2011 and 2021, instead of just the 2 years or every 5 years, every 2 or 3 years. So we'll have more data available for people at more years. We're also looking at modeling more efficiently. Our production team looked at the areas where we run the models and if they can set those areas for the models in different combinations to get outputs faster in terms of computing time. And then also to speed up the computing time, we're also using cloud resources like Google Earth Engine. So the developments over the last several years, I mean, again, coming back to the people and the teams that are building things, all of these improvements will lead to more products and more data for people. And then, I mean, I don't know for sure, but maybe we can look at going back in time further beyond 2011, not just going forward into the future, but maybe going back and, in terms of that time series, that time machine sort of that Landsat can be. So our new set of data, our new updated data sets will be available next year. We're still working on them, finishing things up. They'll be out next year with documentation and some outreach materials. And then beyond that, we're always looking at possibilities. Like, what can we do beyond what we have now, beyond what we're planning for the near term? So I know that there's Landsat 9, there's ISAT 2, there's JEDI, there's all these other instruments that we can start to look at. And then we're primarily focused on canopy cover, but can we start to build nationwide data sets of canopy height? And maybe that's a possibility. So again, it's fun to think about the possibilities, to dream a little bit and think about what could be in the long term. It's exciting. It is, for sure. And again, it helps us get you through the day when you're like, why is my code not working? Or why is this other thing not working? And it's like, okay, well, we're just going to keep working on it, keep trying. We're going to solve it so that we can achieve all of these goals in the long run. I mentioned contact info and some follow-up information. We have a website for our project, and there's an interactive data explorer at the address, the second URL address shown on this slide. And then we also have a email address that you can get in touch with me and others who I work with, that's listed here on this slide. So if you want more information, we have it. If you have a question or something that isn't answered by what we have out there or what I've shared today, then we can get you in touch with, and we can connect you with people who know those details and can help answer those questions. So I'll stop there and hand it back over to Peter or Brian. I'm not sure who's taking over next. I will talk about this all day, so I'm gonna stop here so I don't hog the time from everybody else.
Thanks so much, Stacie. I get excited about this this topic as well, and I think one of these things that makes it a big challenge is literally the millions of acres or millions of pixels that we're talking about here, right? And all of the fun stories that go behind each one of those. So thank you so much for bringing some of that to us. And I have a question for you.
Sure.
If the data if this new 2023 or 2022, what is the year of that tree canopy cover layer that you're working on right now?
So the years, we're working on a time series. You mentioned Landsat and time series earlier. So with the data that we built in the last round that was released a few years ago, we had just 2 years, 2011 and 2016. Right now, our production team is working on building data for 2011, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. So that's what, an 11-year time span, I guess, 11 to 21. So they're working on building data for each year. And then sometimes people, maybe they don't want annual, but maybe they want data every 2 or 3 years. So we're trying to build the data in different combinations to serve different needs that people have. But at the root of that, we've reconfigured the production workflow, and it's just amazing the amount of work that's gone in the last 2, 3, 4 years by our teams of people to build something that allows us to model tree canopy cover on an annual basis between 2011 and 2021. That's what that time series will release in 2023. And then beyond that, we'll keep adding to it forward. I don't know about back in time yet, but definitely going forward, then we'll add 2022, we'll add 2023, and those would be released like in the year 2024, 2025, because it does take us a little while to build all of this. Does that help?
It does. That was exactly it. Because part of the Stacie, and I want to introduce this idea to a lot of the people here, is these are new data products that will be coming out that do need some comparison between some of our ground measurements and what is getting predicted at these locations by Stacie and her team and people that she works with. She's making a prediction at these locations about how much tree height might be there or tree canopy cover, which is one of those metrics that we haven't talked too much about, but is really important when we're looking straight down from space. That activity right at the very beginning of just counting the dots, how many of those fall in your tree canopy, is exactly what we're doing when we do the GLOBE land cover protocol, making the measurements straight up with the paper towel tube, and doing that sort of measurement. And so I think what you demonstrated, Stacie, is this wonderful combination with how many of the GLOBE measurements that have been made over the last 10 years could be compared to some of the products that you are going to be releasing. And that is a really exciting piece of the science that our students could all be involved in, because nobody will have looked at those locations, which to me is always a fun part, like you were saying, about the exploration piece of what we do. So we'll make sure to highlight this viewer where people can actually look at their particular tree canopy cover and compare that to some of their GLOBE measurements that they're making. And we'll make sure to follow up and have some a nice protocol, a direction set that we guide you through, making that comparison between some of the GLOBE measurements and some of the measurements that you've shown us today, because I think that is a great activity for a lot of students to participate in, because we expect there to be differences, don't we, Stacie?
There are different types of measurements, but we recognize that's part of it. And so exploring how they're different definitely still provides information, and we can still compare them. And like everything's so complex, and that's not a bad thing in my view, because it means A, you won't be bored, your brain gets exercise, and there's just, yeah, just all kinds of things to explore. So even if
Yeah.
it's intimidating a bit, sometimes it's like, it's still exciting.
And I want to also kind of highlight that there's a lot of GLOBE community, or a lot of communities who might be actually planting trees this year. We've actually highlighted some of those activities in the past. And what you've shown us today is a way that we can actually monitor those trees growing over time, and actually increasing the canopy cover, and maybe, you know, doing things like changing their heat island, or the thermal temperature underneath that, as those trees grow over time. So I really appreciate that you've demonstrated how how important the time series can be, but also how challenging it can be to gather the ground data to be able to create some of these continental scale maps that you're showing us right now. So thank you so much, Stacie. I really appreciate you taking the time to go through some of this, and especially highlight how we as a GLOBE community can help with some of the work that you're doing. And I think, you know, this is one of those things that we could spend another 3-4 hours showing you all the wonderful data layers that the Forest Service puts together beyond just this tree canopy cover, going into the species that are at that location, or things like that. And so, you know, that's where, you know, please reach out to us, because the Forest Service and GLOBE have actually worked together to create some lessons and some activities, and your teachers can actually participate and earn a stipend for contributing to the U.S. Forest Service's Natural Inquirer, right? And so we've discussed a little bit about some of those things. And so please look to the Forest Service's educational activities and learning activities that they have to supplement some of the activities that are happening in a classroom, and some of those GLOBE measurements.
Millions of possibilities.
Exactly. So, you know, Brian, we could go down and explore some of these data sets, and talk about a particular lesson. But I think let's take a moment here and go into our breakouts and hear from people about what they might be planning this upcoming year, and maybe how what Stacie actually showed us, and even some of these data layers, might be something that is now under consideration in a way that maybe an hour ago nobody was really considering, right?
Yeah, perfect, Peter. And what we can do is, you know, we'll showcase some of these activities that we mentioned earlier based upon the time today. We can share this at next month's webinar as well, some of the specific activities, and go a little more into some of them. I know you're going to talk about the future of forest one, Peter. So yeah, so let me go ahead and once again, but let me pop here to just my slide real fast so you can see once again what the, oops, sorry, I don't want to do that. All right, share screen. All right, so you can see I won't expand anymore. So the breakout room, we're going to be at about 15-20 minutes or so. Once again, there's going to be 3 breakout rooms. One is what are you teaching this year? That's with Peter Falcon. And then the second one is what would you like for year 5 of the campaign? That's with me. And then the third one will be 2023 IVSS product discussion. And once again, about 15-20 minutes. And if you want to, you can, you know, leave one and then join another. They will be open for that time. And then, you know, once we, you know, about 15-20 minutes, I'll send a message through that they'll be closing, and we'll all be brought back to the original room. So let me go ahead and stop sharing that and open up the breakout rooms and choose which you like. Let's go here. Oh, for some reason I'm just going to for some reason hold on a second, I gotta recreate them really fast. I'm not sure why they disappeared, but I'm just going to put room 1, room 2, room 3 so you all know where to go. I'm just going to based on that what you saw. Once again, room 1, what are you teaching this year? These are informal discussions in these breakout rooms. Room 2 is what would you like to see for year 5, and room 3 would be 2023 IVSS project discussion. So just so you see that, let me do this real fast. Yeah, I'm not sure what Zoom was doing and telling me to recreate them, which was odd. I'm just doing a quick thing here. 30 seconds to do that. Name and last one.
Are you doing that, Brian? Can I just say that I can hear
Yeah.
Peter and Stacie talk about land cover and trees pretty much all day. Yeah, the energy and the imagery is really cool. So I just wanted to say that. I'm sitting there with my hand on my chin and like, whoa, wow. So.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, Stacie and I definitely enjoy our conversations together, and we have a lot more ideas than we have time for, which is great for opportunities like this, where we can share some of our ideas and invite other people to experiment with them and personalize them. Because so much of the type of work that Stacie and I do as colleagues actually is looking at millions of locations or trying to look as many as those as possible, but we can't. It's just too many, and so as much as we virtually visit locations through the satellite imagery like this, those ground photos and that personal ecological knowledge that people have are really important to bring into our process. And I think one of the things that Stacie kind of highlighted is it's actually a lot easier to bring in maybe a new satellite or a new sensor or something like that than it is to actually bring in the human dimension of managing forests. Why do people do what they do? Why do they plant the apricot trees in the location that they do? Why did they choose that particular tree or plant? That gets into that idea of land use of trees, and so trying to understand that piece is another part of managing our trees in our forests, and one of the most complicated part to actually incorporate into these models. And so when we think about is this tree going to be there in 20 or 30 years? Is this measurement I'm making today, how long is that going to last? Is the tree going to just stay static, or is it going to keep growing? That question right there, leads us back to this time series. And it goes back to how the Forest Service since 1905 in their beginning has been actually measuring trees, as many as they can, and then organizing that into a database and then passing it on to the next generation. And it's through that aspect of the science that has allowed us to actually see how long does it take for a particular tree to decompose, to turn into soil, to nourish the next plants that are out there, the next trees that are out there. So, again, thanks, Peter. As you can see, you sent me off on a fun tangent, even without even saying anything other than thanks.
Well, when we come back, I do have a question, but I know our breakout rooms are open. So when we come back, maybe we'll ask a quick question for you.
Great.
Is everyone able to, decide which one they want to go to? Because it's acting strange on my end here. I know, so Dorian went to the one. So feel free to
is being recorded.
Looks like we're all back.
Yep. Sorry for the quick kickback.
It's funny, Brian. Our teachers that joined the teaching session were just about to exchange email addresses to see if they can do some type of collaboration for an IVSS project. So I thought that was excellent to see that interaction there.
Awesome. Yeah, we had some good discussion in our group about, some of the things that some of the teachers would like to see, as far as using looking at some of the other campaigns, like bringing in like Peter Griffith from above and showcasing how they look at the the tree canopy cover, the trees and soils and all that as well, because that's the above is the Arctic Boreal forest research project, and then also using ICESat-2 data more, as well as having students come together and present about their forests and their locations, have a, like a webinar where we have people coming in from all over the globe, the globe community, showcasing the forests in their area. So we all kind of get a feel for, what are the environments and like, forest land covers that the students and teachers are looking at in their environment.
So, yeah, we on our group, we saw a similar theme of, where students go out and make the observations, and they're happy to do that. They love doing that. But often when they come back, it's like, now what? How do we make sense of the data? How do we make sense of the usage? How do we make those relationships? So we saw that in this conversation as well. And we saw one of our students is using ArcGIS for story mapping, something that we're happy to see because it's a great tool to help present your IVSS projects. So if you're not familiar with that, I know we have tutorials that both Dorian and Peter put together on our website. So that's something that you should look through. And then as I mentioned, we talked about perhaps, sharing some contact information to see if there's any way we can do some collaboration for an IVSS project. And if you need help with that, I put my email in the chat box there. I'll be happy to help those teachers who were interested in doing that as well.
And I think that's one of the major hurdles, of course, Peter. You got the data. What do you do? That's one thing that we've been trying to focus on. And I know you and I both had that issue with the students in Estonia. We had all that data collection. We had a 5-hour expedition in different areas, but then they came back and the data, like, what do we do? So we had to guide them to showcase this is what you can do with the data. These are potential research projects, things like that. So I think that's always a big issue with this. And what I'm hoping to do is, in next month's webinar, date we determined, is open these rooms up again, these breakout rooms up again, and have some more discussions toward the end as well. But I think we should definitely need to, talk some more about this, and people can join other ones as well.
Yeah, and I think these webinars, in particular, Peter's sessions, actually help them understand, like, all the different resources in terms of satellite data that they can use when making their measurements and seeing all the resources that are out there. I know we had in past webinars where Peter kind of showed Copernicus data and other data sets that are available for people to use. So once again, if you're not familiar with that, by all means, we archive this stuff. Look through them. He has some great talks about a lot of satellite imagery that you can use in your classroom in comparison to your observations. And if you want to add to it, Peter, by all means.
No, that's perfect. We want to entice people back to our webinars in the future here as well. There is a lot of resources that are out there, and we can overwhelm you with sharing everything that NASA has put together. And then there's the U.S. Geological Survey, who is now in charge of their first satellite, Landsat 9. They actually just got the keys from NASA last week. So it was 50 years in the making, but that is really exciting news. And like I said, you have the opportunity to connect your students to some of the satellite data, like Stacie was highlighting earlier. Model some of your locations, and that opportunity is a really unique one because what that allows students to do is novel new science and contribute to the conversation that is out there. So I'm really excited about some of these cross collaborations that can occur this year. We have lots of methods that we will be sharing out to help students understand their local environment, but also connect to other areas that might have similar type of environments. And so I just want to thank everybody for coming to our webinar today. As usual, we filled it up and overflowed it as we like to do, because trees are one of these incredibly diverse topics. Depending on where you are and who you are, that same tree can look many different ways. And so, you know, we are here to support you in your endeavors in teaching students what you need to teach in your classroom, whether it be about trees as food, trees as fiber, trees as a habitat. There's a lot of ways that trees impact us. And as we enter year 5, right, of our Trees Around the Globe student research campaign, we have a lot of resources. So please reach out to us and share with us some of your ideas or ways that we can support you.
I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you, Peter. Thank you everyone for joining, and stay tuned for the announcement of the next webinar and the continuation of the campaign for year 5. Thank you, everyone.